The Dave Hooker Show. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Objective insight, expertise, top guests. Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free. Also available on offthehooksports.com.
I compute and obey.
Now to Dave Hooker.
Ready.
Off and rolling. Welcome to the program. We discussed Joe Milton III, why a national columnist thinks that Shane Beamer and Spencer Rattler are a better bet than Joe Milton III. And that's not me ripping him on the message board. I trust Joe Milton III more than Shane Beamer and Spencer Rattler, but we'll have that discussion. That'll be today's tough question. T. Martin's son is in the portal. Is that somebody that the Vols should go after? Also, a little Josh Heupel versus Lincoln Riley. We've done this before, so we'll welcome in our Oklahoma Sooners fans, as they will no doubt rip us for discussing Josh Heupel versus Lincoln Riley. And we'll hear from some Southern Cal fans as well. This goes way back to one of the first conversations we had about Oklahoma and could Josh Heupel ever go back. It is SEC spring meetings, so we've got Brian Kelly and Kirby Smart, their takes on Nick Saban, and also how about softball making it back to the College World Series. So a lot going on. Caleb Calhoun, how are you, sir?
I am good. Happy last day of May. As we all know, that's the greatest month of the year because it's my birth month. But
no doubt. And it's my anniversary month.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
So it's a lot of things going on at once. How do we keep track? Well, extensive note taking. And I want to tell you that you did a great job not coming down on Adam Rittenberg from ESPN yesterday. I was a little concerned that you might come down on him after he shared his thoughts on offensive production projections over the next few years. So we didn't see any of that. And
you expect me to be like, you suck at him, you're terrible.
I didn't know, quite frankly. I've seen those go south by, let me just put it kindly, by those that had a ton more experience than me at the time and a ton more experience than you at the time. Let's just say it might have to do with the Lady Vols running up the score and Chicago Sun-Times Rick Tellender was on the program. And maybe the program is called Sports Talk. But that's been like 20 years ago, so we don't have to discuss that anymore. First, let's check in with Jacob Warren, who will have a fresh edition of the Vol Report brought to you by Bassey Lawn and Garden. That'll come up later today on our YouTube channel. How do you follow that and the Celebrate 98 series? Jacob, tell me.
What's up, everybody? This is Jacob Warren asking you to like, subscribe, and share. Dave needs this.
Exactly. He does. So just do exactly what Jacob says. All right. So we started off as we want you to hit that like button to bring more people in, but it is time for what the H?
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
What the H? Today brought to you by Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Best prices, best service in the biz. How about that? Had a conversation about him today, as a matter of fact. Somebody says, man, he's a great guy. AndyMasonRealEstate.com, over 40 years of experience in his office. All right, so what the H? I saw this, and I thought at one point that maybe Caleb had a misprint, a mistype. Something was wrong. Tennessee is a very experienced football team. What? Doesn't it feel like this is just year 3 of a rebuild and based off old school college football, which is really just 5, 6, 7 years ago, that Tennessee should be rebuilding and should have an experience issue? Well, they don't. 18 of 22 starters could be seniors. Caleb, this is something that was addressed by 247 Sports. Pretty stunning when you look at 18 of 22 starters could be the seniors. And I don't want to get into my hinting that 2024 is going to be the year to best judge Josh Heupel. We can do that later. But first of all, what do you make of that number? That's a pretty big number. What the H?
Yeah, it totally shocked me. So for those who want to check it out, it's another one by our friend Brad Crawford, who does a ton of work. We cite him a lot here because he does a lot of great work, quite honestly. And this one talks about what insider sources are saying about each SEC team. And so with Tennessee, we've been hearing all the talk about Joe Milton, Squirrel White, and the receivers, and kind of all the stuff you expect to hear. But the underrated part was that Tennessee low-key once again is loaded with experience despite losing a ton of experience last year. And I went back and thought about it, and this is still going to be a thing, by the way, for at least one more year, which is the COVID eligibility of 2020 has had so many players come back for 5th and 6th years of eligibility. You have the same thing going on right now with Tennessee. And Joe Milton himself, for instance, coming back and taking advantage of the 5th year of eligibility. Jalen McCullough in the secondary, and I think that's going to be a big help to them. What's underrated is where the real talk is we didn't think about this, but they are reportedly much more experienced on defense this year than they were last year. As a matter of fact, according to this article, insiders expect Tennessee to finish in the top 6 of the SEC defensively this year, based on how experienced they are on defense, which if they do that and this offense doesn't miss a beat, I mean, Dave, then you have to start talking national championship possibilities, right?
You do, and I do want to be really careful with this because, listen, you're right. Brad does a great job, and he's reputable, and I think that these talking to coaches things, which I do, and I drop hints of coaches I talk to all the time on the program. I don't get on here and just make stuff up. So that you're hearing it from I would like to think a good source, and you're hearing it from somebody that's in the know. I'm not talking about me, but the people I talk to. So, but the scary part about these things, Caleb, is that could another coach try to raise the bar on an up-and-coming program like a Tennessee or like a South Carolina to put a little bit more heat on them? Like Urban Meyer saying that Texas was the most talented team in the nation. I think Urban Meyer, if something happened to Steve Sarkisian, would take that job tomorrow. I think he raised the bar publicly on purpose. So I do have that concern. And when we factor in the COVID year as far as seniors, yeah, some of them are seniors, but I think Jacob Warren has been a senior 3 times. This will be his 3rd tour as a senior. So that's a little goofy too. But I think that coaches have already started to raise the bar publicly, and they don't give their names necessarily here, but I think you're going to see that, and you're going to see that at SEC Media Days. You're going to hear some coach somewhere talk about how great, and I'm lumping together Tennessee and South Carolina, how great their quarterback play can be this year, how great their offenses were at times last year. And I think that's coaches trying to raise the bar. I'm not sure who that'll be, but I think you'll see some of that at SEC Media Days. Maybe not spring meetings, which is ongoing. Thoughts?
Maybe with that top 6 defense, but in terms of the 18 of 22, I mean, that's just analytically, that's just factually true. Right. And so it's hard to look past it. I mean, last year, I said this going into last year, which was, we keep forgetting like what the state of Tennessee was in people's minds last year. But I said, expect a 5-0 start. And people said I was crazy. I said, expect a 5-0 start because of how the schedule lays out when they play at Florida and LSU and Pittsburgh, kind of changing quarterbacks. But also because Tennessee last year had so much returning talent. I mean, playing together for a year in that system means a lot. And this year, again, they're low-key flying under the radar. Now, what's more valuable, Dave? And I would ask you, and this is actually a genuine question. The actual experience of a player or the number of years a team has played together? The cumulative experience of a team, like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, or the number of years they've played together with each other?
Well, I think the number of years they played against each other, but that's not really a thing anymore with the transfer portal. I mean, nobody's going to say, if Dante Thornton comes in and catches 20 passes for 200 yards this season, nobody's going to say, well, he didn't have enough time to work with Tennessee's offense. I mean, sounds like an excuse almost to me. I mean, the game is way different. So 5 years ago, I would have told you absolutely these guys need to play together and no chemistry, but that's not what anybody's looking for nowadays. They're looking for guys to come in and have an immediate impact.
And I hear that a lot, but then I think last year, okay, yes, Brew McCoy was the number 2 receiver, but if Cedric Tillman doesn't get hurt, Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt would have both had more receiving yards than Brew McCoy. So outside of Brew McCoy, it was everybody that really contributed last year was on the team the year before. That was a significant player.
That's true. But you bring up the Brew thing. Okay, Brew coming over was late to get started in August. Okay, because he wasn't cleared. We didn't know until 7-8 days before the season started that he was going to be able to play after the transfer from Southern California. So Dante Thornton is going to be a more typical type of prospect that comes in early, at least the summer, if not mid-season, and gets to go through spring camp. So that to me is the exception to the rule. Sure, you would love to have guys that transfer and you could mold for 2 years like they'll have with Brew, but I don't think they're going to have that with most of the guys they bring in, whether we're talking about Peely or Thornton or whoever it might be. I think the goal is to get 1 good year out of them. If you get 2, that's great. Now, I'm not talking about the guys that come up from the group of 5. I'm talking about the guys that are already bona fide stars that want to get paid. And that's what Dante Thornton is. And he just wants to get paid. So he's getting paid. You're not going to get 2 years out of those guys, are you?
I shouldn't think so. You might with Dante only because he might be a little bit buried in the depth chart this year, so he has to come back the next year. That's the real smart move for Josh Heupel, is to bury these guys just enough for a year where they get some yards, but not a lot of yards, so their NFL draft stock's not high enough, so they come back another year. I mean,
you joke, but that is something that was done previously when coaches, not with transfers so much, but when coaches had some leverage, that was something that was done. I don't think they have that leverage now. I think Dante Thornton, not specifically him, I don't know that young man, but I think a top prospect like that would say, okie dokie, you didn't find a place for me and I came in January, then I'm cruising on out in the next January. I think that's what would happen. And he'd go to Miami was in the running. There were other schools in the running. I mean, heck, he could go back to Oregon and get a better paycheck if they got the right guy lined up. So I don't think that's going to happen. And remember this too. There is pressure on Josh Heupel to play the guys that got a price tag via the transfer portal. So it's not like it used to be where the coach has all the power, which for the most part, I'm a big fan of. I don't think the coach should have absolute power. But in this particular case, it allows the kid to make some really questionable decisions. Not necessarily Dante, but if somebody bolts after a year, Caleb, that ain't great for anybody.
No, unless that's the 1 year you win the national title and, then you're going to take it. But I mean, I get your point. I would say that the question with Tennessee this year, though, the reason I asked that question, experience versus historical team chemistry, is this year they're relying on more transfers than last year. Not when I say transfers, 1 year just transferred into the program this year. Last year, almost their whole team, even the transfers, had been in the program for a couple of years. Again, like I said, Brew McCoy and Gerald Mincy, I think, were the only 2 transfers from the previous year that were major contributors. If anybody wants to correct me, I could be forgetting somebody. I'm spouting this off the top of my head. But this year, we're talking Dante Thornton, Andres, at least 2 offensive linemen probably, Keenan Peely, Gabe Judy-Lally. These are all transfers that they're probably going to have to rely on this year significantly as part of their rotation and weren't on the team last year. So you wonder, is that going to mess things up a little bit more than what was on the team, than what happened last year?
No, it could. And you also have to, and on our message board, somebody pointed this out. I bet Joe Milton is getting a ton as well. Well, he should. He certainly should. You shouldn't pay everybody a premium rate that comes in without taking care of the guys that are already there. I think it was pretty obvious that Hendon Hooker got taken care of. He had the Mercedes-Benz endorsement that came along in November. So they were continuing to work for him, even though they knew what they were going to get the rest of the season. That's a really solid player. They didn't know about the injury and a really good leader. So you've got to continue to work for those guys. I completely agree with that. And if Joe Milton's not a millionaire by now, he should be, because he's the guy that's going to lead your program next. And I think most of these guys, especially at quarterback, are going to be in the $1 million range.
And we can bet that Keenan Peely's not going to fight him over that. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that was quickly put to bed about the whole NIL thing. Not to get sidetracked, but people told me that, well, I mean, Cooper Mays said it on our YouTube channel a year ago almost. He said, nobody's going to look at the quarterback and be jealous of him because he's the quarterback. He also got the most chicks in high school. He gets the better deals in the NFL. I mean, what's different? The quarterback is the quarterback, Caleb.
Yeah, that's like when you're sitting. If you're a higher up person in a corporation and you're high up in management and making a 6-figure salary, you're not going to complain that the CEO is making $1 million salary. He's the CEO. I mean, that's how it is.
The CFO doesn't look at his paycheck and says, I deserve more. Well, if you deserve more, then become the CEO. Rocky Top Tom said the entire NIL setup is the worst thing that ever happened to college sports. I'm going to take you a step further, and I'm not going to argue with that, but I think that players deserve to get some cash. So I'm going to say this for you, Rocky Top Tom. I think the NCAA is the worst thing to happen to amateur athletics. I think they allowed this to happen. They could have found some sort of stipend. They could have allowed the players to unionize so that they had them all under one collective, but they didn't do that. They're the ones who blew it. In the end, capitalism was what ultimately led to this. And if you don't like it, I certainly understand. Is it completely different? Yes, absolutely. No doubt about it. I get that, but that's where we are. It is time for today's tough question, and it's brought to you by our friends at crafttreats.com. Barrett Sallee makes an appearance. Actually, he might make a real appearance before it's all said and done. Maybe we'll visit with Barrett of CBS Sports, and we'll get his thoughts on today's tough question, brought to you by crafttreats.com.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
What does Barrett Sallee think about Joe Milton III as compared to Shane Beamer and Spencer Rattler? Well, I'll tell you, and it's brought to you by crafttreats.com. With crafttreats.com, you can use the promo code Off the Hook, again, Off the Hook, and get 20% off. That includes the chill pills, but all products. But with the chill pills, they've got the CBD derivatives that can help with your pet's digestive issues, arthritis issues, or anxiety issues. So here is what Barrett Sallee says, quote, I don't trust Joe Milton. I trust Spencer Rattler, and I trust Shane Beamer. Little background. This is a pretty vast departure, and I will credit Barrett for not getting hung up on an old Tennessee take that he had, and that was he loved Butch Jones and thought that Tennessee was going to win the East and eventually the SEC championship. So he has moved on from that, which is good. But based off 2 games, I have trouble drawing the same conclusion. And I know someone here think that I'm a Joe Milton hater. I have more faith in Joe Milton than I do Shane Beamer or Spencer Rattler as a group, as what they'll do this season. Now, if in the magic world of portals, you could trade a Spencer Rattler for Joe Milton III, I think there would be a case to be made for that. But as far as this year and what they accomplish, Joe Milton III and Josh Heupel's system, as opposed to South Carolina, what they got going on with Beamer and Rattler, I would take Tennessee in that regard. You, Caleb?
Easily. Just because I have sorry, I have to say this. It's funny. You brought up Barrett Sallee being a Butch Jones fan, and I've actually defended people who thought the Butch Jones hire was smart at the time. But it is funny that he's defending Shane Beamer right now when a lot of people think Shane Beamer is the new Butch Jones.
I actually like that comparison a lot.
Yeah. So Yes, I have more faith in Josh Heupel and Joe Milton, and here's why. I think Shane Beamer and trying to figure out his offense is a deer in headlights. Look, I think the reason Spencer Rattler came on last year, at the end of last year, was Marcus Satterfield finally decided, hey, maybe I should utilize Spencer Rattler this way. And it took them till November to figure that out. And I'm like, what type of offensive coach are you when you can't figure that out until November? And Josh Heupel would have known what to do in January. Now, Marcus Satterfield is gone. They got Dowell Gaines as offensive coordinator, who I have no faith in whatsoever. I think Tennessee fans should be celebrating that hire all day long. And so because of that, yeah, I have way more faith in Josh Heupel and Joe Milton. Now I'm with you. I'll be honest. If I'm Josh Heupel, which quarterback would I rather have? Probably Spencer Rattler. But
okay, well, let me ask you this, because on the message board, Rocky Top Tom said to compare Spencer Rattler and Joe Milton is kind of weird. They couldn't be more different contextually, and that's true. One's the big arm guy. One is a guy who can throw in different arm angles and more natural runner. So if you had to take one, just regardless of the offense, let's say we're redoing the recruiting process, which would you take out of the two? Regardless of offense, it can be in Josh Heupel's offense, it can be in Spencer Rattler's, it can be in Shane Beamer's offense, and then I'm going to tell you what I think of Shane Beamer here in a second. But first, let's get into that. Who would you take?
I'd still take Spencer Rattler. I still value accuracy overall. Also, we have a little bit of evidence of this because, remember, Spencer Rattler has played in effectively Josh Heupel's offense because he played for Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, and he was, after 2020, considered a Heisman candidate going into 2021. So, he has a history of producing at a high level in this offense. We're going to compare the two coaches in a few minutes. That Joe Milton doesn't have yet.
Yeah, and here's my issue if I'm South Carolina fan out there, and we have a lot of South Carolina fans. If I'm South Carolina fan out there, I can make a strong argument for Spencer Rattler over Joe Milton III. I'm going to abstain for a second. You give me a month into the season, I'll give you my take. I probably lean towards Rattler, to be real honest with you at this point. But I got very little faith in Shane Beamer long term. You brought it up. It's been on the message board. It took him until November to figure out how to use Spencer Rattler. That, to me, is a troublesome issue. Let's face it, in 2021, Tennessee went out there and they weren't perfect offensively, but everybody knew the direction. There was no question. And Josh Heupel had a vision not just for a month or a week or the next practice, but a year, 2 years down the road. And I think you saw that happen last year. So the 2021 season, I guess it was in particular the Missouri game, a lot of people have pointed to as kind of the turnaround. That was all expected to happen by Josh Heupel. I don't know that Shane Beamer expected to up and beat Clemson and Tennessee and suddenly find their offense at the end of the year. Not even close. I don't think that's the case. I think he got very fortunate, caught Tennessee at the right time for them. And then I think Clemson was a little overrated.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. And Dave, I would ask you this. When is the last time you've covered a team or coach, or you could remember, where a coach didn't figure out something that works until mid-November, like that late in the season?
2005.
Well, they never figured it out. I thought.
That's right. The Ainge and Clausen thing was a fiasco.
Yeah, but there wasn't. There was a clear answer with Spencer Rattler. There was no answer with the Ainge and Clausen thing, I felt, because I will say, look, I know the players wanted Rick Clausen, but once Fulmer stuck with Rick Clausen, the offense did sputter awfully in quite a few games. Remember that 6-3 Alabama game, the worst played game I've ever watched in the history of football?
Well, but if you're talking about indecisiveness, that to me stands out. Most coaches will pick the dude and go. I thought they made a huge mistake. If you want to go way back with Rashad Baker, I thought he came out and just looked like the most, and Philip Fulmer said it, most natural receiver he had ever seen. And then he was at defensive back the next day, but he never went back. He never went back and forth. So you make your decision and you live by it. Jason Witten's another example. They moved to tight end, and he was a tight end. There was no discussing it. You can transfer if you want. But, yeah, I mean, to me, that is the biggest issue is the uncertainty into November. I've never seen that happen except for 2005.
Okay. My question is if the uncertainty into November and then you find your answer in November, because Shane Beamer found his answer. And I think that's even a bigger indictment because like the answer was always there on how to use Spencer Rattler. And he just didn't know it at the time. And I think that's what really throws me off. The only thing I could think of is
here's another one on the message board that's really good. The UT staff is still trying to figure out how to use Alvin Kamara.
Shane Beamer's Butch Jones.
That's pretty good. I mean, let's be honest, because I mean, how hard is it to figure out to use that dude? He can do everything.
Yeah, that's a good one. Butch Jones, there's actually a few. Remember when Florida had the Hail Mary to beat him in 2017 and he's like in his press conference, well, maybe we should have a dime package on defense. He didn't have a dime package.
Well, and another one, too, that ended up working out for Tennessee, if you want to go back to 1994, they weren't sure that Peyton Manning was the guy. I mean, Brandon Stewart gave them some flexibility. I think inside the coaching office, they thought that Peyton was the guy, but Brandon Stewart was a lot like Heath Schuler. He gave them some flexibility running the football when they could use that because of the injury to Colquitt and the first drive of the season at UCLA. So, yeah, I mean, that was a little indecisive, but I still think at the end of the day, they thought Peyton's the guy.
Yeah, and it was indecisiveness they didn't feel like they had to prepare for at the time until Jerry Colquitt got hurt. I mean, I give them a break on that because I don't think they planned for Colquitt getting hurt.
No, I agree, but I'm just trying to come up with, I mean,
basically this one's the most inexcusable. The Shane Beamer one is just next level inexcusable.
Yes. Right up there with Alvin Kamara. I mean, that's a pretty good one by the message board. I mean, I'm watching him and I'm like, am I missing something? Does he not know pass pro? Because I wasn't covering Tennessee. I was covering more Mid-East recruiting, and I really thought I was missing something. I thought he was either a bad dude or something was going on, and I just asked around out of curiosity. I didn't even do anything journalistically with it. And they're like, there's nothing wrong with him. We don't know what the heck's going on around this place. And that could be another what the H. What happened to Alvin Kamara?
Hooker show.
Oh, here's a funny one. Here's a good one. Ben Howland, who just got fired at Mississippi State. This was in basketball. But when he got hired by Mississippi State, he'd been fired by UCLA. And when he gets hired, he's like, yeah, I think I'm going to start pressing more. It kind of worked my last year at UCLA. It's like, that's the first time you ever learned to press in basketball as a head coach?
Yeah. That's when the AD says,
Why don't you shut the hell up?
all right, 2 minutes. Coming back, we have T. Martin's son in the portal. How good is he? Should the Vols go after him? That's pretty cool. We'll talk some Navy Schuler as well. 2 minutes, and we're back with you. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center. Ah.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Our family has been creating one-of-a-kind pieces of jewelry in West Knoxville since 1986. Each piece is a combination of unique processes that bring your idea to life. Every day in our shop, a truly special item with a story all its own is being manufactured in our facility, bringing the history and family sentiment into a whole new generation of life. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler, a title that we value and respect. Because to me, being a jeweler and owning a jewelry store are not the same thing. I'm Rick Terry. I'm a jeweler, and we want to be your jeweler. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street right next to the Tennessee Theater.
When you want a hard cider that's easy to enjoy, one that's crafted to perfection, you need Tennessee Cider Company. Some say it's the signature cider of the South. Others say it's the cure to your craving. They all say you'll savor every sip. With a selection of ciders free to sample, all it takes is one taste. Visit tncidercompany.com for more information, as well as to shop our ciders and merchandise online. Thirsty yet? Doors open at 10 a.m.
You're listening to The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
The internet is full of pictures of each and every one of you.
Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free.
Is there nothing you people can't do?
Also available on OffTheHookSports.com.
Let's go to the judge, jury, and potential executioner on this. Caleb Calhoun. On our message board, Tom says, I guess that famous blooper video of Heath Schuler headbutting the stands as the Redskins quarterback did have some brain impact. I'm pretty sure that was Gus Frerotte in place of Heath Schuler, right?
Let's see.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that he did. That he suffered a neck injury. Yeah, Heath got a raw. Yeah, was that Gus? That was Gus, right? That wasn't Heath.
Yeah, that was Gus. By the time but for the record, Dave, you got to be fair to me. I had to look this up because by the time I was old enough to watch football, Heath Schuler was already traded away by Washington. So
yeah, and let me tell you, Heath got a raw deal in that whole thing. Heath got a really raw deal because Sonny Jurgensen was the color commentator of the Redskins network, and he fell in love with Gus Frerotte. Heath had a very serious toe injury off his push foot, and he still had a limp years later. I don't think he does anymore. I've talked to him on the phone, and we've had him on the show, but I haven't seen him in person. But Heath got a raw deal on that thing. And I still believe that he could have been a really good quarterback in the NFL. So let's get to T. Martin's son. T. Martin's son, Caden Martin, has had enough of Coral Gables. Former Knoxville Catholic baseball and football star Caden Martin is leaving Miami after 1 year. He announced that on Twitter, saying, first off, I would like to thank the University of Miami for giving me the opportunity to grow as a player and person this past season. I would also like to thank each of my teammates and support staff around me for putting in the time to help me develop as a player. With that being said, my family and I have decided that it's in my best interest to enter the transfer portal and continue my collegiate career elsewhere, likely at Tennessee. Now, I added that last part. He said, looking forward to the next chapter. So the question is that came up during our 3:30 a.m. Production meeting is, should Tennessee take Caden Martin? The answer is a resounding heck yeah. Why wouldn't you take him? He plays baseball as well. I mean, why wouldn't you take him? I would go after him in a heartbeat.
no, I agree. The baseball part is the biggest reason to go after him. Caden Martin as a quarterback. The unfortunate thing about him was, I don't know if people know this, but he was offered by Alabama when he was an 8th grader. It was one of those early offers. But as you know, Dave, covering recruiting, that you have to estimate that they're going to grow into a certain size that Caden Martin never grew into. So he only was a 2-star coming out. So he doesn't have his father.
So he was offered in football, not baseball.
Yes, in football.
In 8th grade, Nick Saban program?
Grade. He was offered by
really
Nick Saban. Yeah, so he doesn't have his father's raw physical gifts.
Maybe they were thinking that they had to get him pretty quick before the kid got paid like T did. Anyway, I'm joking.
Oh my gosh,
he didn't get paid. Maybe.
Well, I mean, I don't think T has been back to Alabama ever since he left Alabama. I'll just say that much.
There's a really gray area over whether or not he was a prospect at the time, but he did receive money from a Tennessee booster that lived in Alabama. That was the report. So anyway, but yeah, Caden Martin did not grow into what T did? Is that part of the issue?
He didn't grow into T's physical stature. He's like 5'11", 6 feet-ish, 205. T was listed as 6'2". I think he's closer to 6'3". And we're talking 216, what, 225 probably actually when he played, I'm guessing around that area. So it's the same issue with Navy Schuler. Navy Schuler is the exact same story. His father, he didn't grow into his father's size, or didn't have his father's physical gifts. He's at Tennessee right now. And it's so funny to think about this, to have Caden Martin and Navy Schuler, they were both on the offense, because they both surrounded Peyton Manning, but they are two of the most similar style of quarterbacks I can think of, T. Martin and Heath Schuler. They're very similar with their styles and how they played.
Yeah, I actually think that Heath was better all around as far as an athlete. I thought he could have won the decathlon. I think you and I have talked about this. If somebody had to put their arm around a 10-year-old Heath Schuler and said, "We're going to train you," he would have won the gold medal in the Olympics in the decathlon. There's no question in my mind. He was that physically gifted. He's one of the most physically gifted people that I've ever been around. So, I mean, that's a pretty high standard right there. But T was right up there.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. T was right up there too. No question.
Yeah, and I've always wondered, like, who was the better quarterback? Because, I mean, obviously T was the winner, but, you know, the thing that makes it tricky for me is they both had an unfortunate circumstance. T's first year starting was better than Heath's first year starting, but Heath's first year starting was the whole 1992 Fulmer Majors saga, which split the whole team apart.
It's crazy.
But yeah, exactly. But T's second year starting versus Heath's second year starting, they both started 2 years. T had Randy Sanders instead of David Cutcliffe coaching him his second year, whereas Heath got David Cutcliffe basically both years. And I'm like, what could T. Martin have done in 1999 if David Cutcliffe was still there? I feel like he would have been a lot, because he kind of regressed from 98 to 99.
He did a little bit, and I think that he had the fundamentals in place from working with David. I think, though, that you have to continue to pound that home, and I don't think that was pounded home nearly as much. I mean, you got to remember, T. Martin's almost the same age as Randy Sanders at the time it took over. I mean, that's a slight exaggeration, but they were only like 10, 12 years different. So it's tough to stay on him about fundamentals. And then I think you and I would agree that play design, game planning, and everything slipped from David Cutcliffe to Randy Sanders. No offense to Randy, but it slipped a little, right?
Absolutely. Funny enough, after looking at Randy when he was at ETSU, and there's some coaches like this, he's more of a head coach than a coordinator. And I know that's like, you always say someone's a coordinator, not a coach, but there are people who they actually can make good head coaches, but they're not necessarily cut out as coordinators. And I think Randy Sanders kind of fits that bill a little bit.
Well, and let's be honest, Philip, also Fulmer, he disassociated himself to a certain extent with coaching. Not completely, but to a large extent, he wanted to be the CEO. He said that when David Cutcliffe was rehired to a group of reporters after the press conference. He said, "I think the best way to grow this thing is for me to be the CEO type and be able to raise money and recruit." That sounds good in theory, but he's a very good offensive coach. So he didn't need to be that removed. So I think that's part of the
offensive line coach. I'm only going as far as offensive line coach.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, I'll take that. But still, to have another intelligent offensive coach in the room means something. And I don't think Randy had a lot of that. I think he was expected to be John Chavis or David Cutcliffe and just take it over. That's yours. Run with it. Go, Randy, go. And I think that's very difficult to do when you've coached these players as a position coach and making that jump. And quite frankly, it may have just really been outside of his realm of ability.
Yeah, and this is the problem with Fulmer. If you want to be the CEO, because I think I see like Dabo Swinney as a CEO, and I'm sure you do too, as a CEO of a program. But if you're going to be a CEO,
totally, and when you lose Brent Venables, I think there's a real issue there. But yes, totally, right. That's a really good. I think that's what Philip wanted to be. Right,
exactly. And if you want to be a CEO, the rule number one is you have to make the right staff hires. I mean, that's you can't be a CEO unless you know you're going to make the right staff hires. So you have to know that Randy Sanders is an offensive coordinator material. you have to know that Dave Clawson's not going to fit with your offense or what you're trying to do, and the dynamics are just going to be a massive catastrophe, which it was. And so,
who remembers these names? Pat Washington and Larry Slade, receivers coach and defensive backs coach, respectively. They were, I thought, and a lot of people thought, they were given too long of a leash and held on way, way too long. So that gets out. I never thought of it from this perspective, but that gets into the whole managing a staff thing, where if Dabo Swinney doesn't prove he can do that without Britt Venables, you've got a real problem. Now, he may do that. I know he brought in Lincoln Riley's, is it Brian? He brought in his Garrett as the offensive coordinator. Maybe he can be the CEO type, but I don't think it worked for Philip Fulmer. And be able to fire friends, as Smoky Mountain Red pointed out. Let's remember, these guys were making $75,000, $100,000 a year. And if you fired them, it's not like you can coach for another program down the road. You're going to have to relocate your family. There was that sort of thing that Fulmer had to deal with. So I give him a little grace on that.
Well, and there was, with the friends thing there. Yes. You got stuck with maybe Larry Slade and Pat Washington. You also got incredible loyalty out of Dan Brooks, maybe the best position coach in Tennessee football history.
Steve Caldwell.
Yeah. And so it pays off either way. It's just, I think you can't, if you want to be the CEO like that, then when you hire the staff, you have to give them the keys. And so, like you've talked about, Fulmer gave Dave Clawson the keys, but he's like, but I still want this system to be run. Well, I guarantee you, Dabo is hiring a staff, and he is completely washing his hands from that and saying, you know what? You guys run the offense. I'm not going to force you into something I'm trying to run.
Worst move that Philip Fulmer made with his coaching staff before we get to SEC spring meetings was?
I mean, it was obviously hiring Dave Clawson. I mean, that's easily number one, but Randy
it was made about a month before that.
Not promoting Trooper Taylor?
Yep.
Do you think Trooper Taylor was coordinator material though? I mean, that's good.
I think that it took me 30 minutes of research to figure out that Dave Clawson was very questionable coordinator material. I think that you're fair to question whether or not Trooper Taylor was ready, but he had coached running backs, so he knew blocking schemes inside the box, and he had coached receivers, so he knew passing trees. Is he going to be the next David Cutcliffe? Probably not. But is he going to be as good as Dave Clawson at that time in Dave Clawson's career? I have zero doubt that was the case. Question, where is Trooper Taylor? He was at Duke, and I have his number. I need to reach out to him. I haven't talked to him. He's one of the few people that I would really call a friend in the coaching community. There's always that natural barrier between media and coaches. So I need to reach out to him. Vassy Lawn and Garden, Man Alive, it's worth the drive in Cleveland, Tennessee. Industrial and commercial mowers, worth the drive from Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga. It's Vassy Lawn and Garden, Man Alive, it's worth the drive. Go to vassy.com to learn more. Toro, count on it. And they bring you the Vol Report, brought to you by Vassy Lawn and Garden, the Vol Report with Jacob Warren. I will call Trooper. We'll get him on the show. He'll bring it, throw high heat. There's no question about it. All right, let's get to SEC spring meetings. We'll play a little bit of Four Downs. Four Downs now is brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com.
4 downs. 4 questions. 4 answers. The Dave Hooker Show. 4 downs. A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
First down, Brian Kelly says he really wants to play Alabama while Saban is still there. Do you buy that? Wants to play Alabama every season? First down, you buy it or not?
I do. And for the context, guys, we're talking about the 3 permanent, 6 rotating opponents that's floated if the SEC goes to 9 games. Nick Saban complained about that a month ago about how Alabama would have to play Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU. Brian Kelly comes out yesterday and it's like, I don't care. I'll play Alabama every year. And so I do. I think Brian Kelly knows what he's building at LSU, and he knows that they're about to be the cream of the crop in the West.
Remind me, how did LSU do against Alabama last year?
I believe they won, didn't they?
Yes. And how many years? Yes. And how many years? Don't steal the punchline from me. How many years has LSU had this Brian Kelly guy as their head coach?
1.
Yeah. Why in the world wouldn't he want to play Alabama each and every year? I totally buy that. That's first down.
And by the way, where does the Alabama quarterback he faced last year rank among greatest quarterbacks Nick Saban ever coached?
Fair.
Maybe number 1.
Yeah, that's fair.
So he beat Nick Saban with the best quarterback Nick Saban's ever had.
Yeah, and those that don't know the west side of the conference, that is a very strong traditional rivalry. It gets lost sometimes. People that know the Iron Bowl and they know Alabama and Auburn as the Iron Bowl, that's a big deal, and obviously it is. But the LSU, I mean, that's a big rivalry for LSU and Alabama. I can guarantee you LSU fans would want Alabama on the annual schedule. Kirby Smart calls the SEC schedule overrated. That's second down. What is he talking about exactly?
Oh, he's talking about the 3-6 format. You know, there's debate of who the team's permanent opponent should be and what's fair. And Kirby Smart is calling this whole debate overrated. I'm looking it up now, but I have to be honest. I think Kirby Smart is just happy with the break he got because the floated permanent opponent for Georgia was Kentucky, Florida, and Auburn. And Kentucky, Florida, and Auburn. Florida still has not cleaned themselves up since 2010. And Auburn, it's outside of spending $100,000 on Cam Newton for an undefeated season in a national championship. I mean, they're so hot and cold, Auburn is. It seems like they're always perpetually like in the 15 to 25 range of the top 25 and maybe get over the hump once every 10 years. So I think
I was told it was $180, but what do I know? All right, for a Cam. All right, so Nick Saban against 3 schools. It's third down, rumored to be designated versus Alabama in the 3 permanent opponent format. He's voiced this before. What are his thoughts now at SEC spring meetings? And we'll have a report from there that's going on in Destin right now.
Oh, it's Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee are the 3 and the 6 for Saban, and he's against those permanent opponents. I've heard rumors that after Nick Saban has been screaming to go to 9 games for years, he's reportedly interested in sticking at 8 games now if the SEC won't fix this.
Okay. The thing about Nick Saban is he will voice his, and I respect this about him, he'll voice his opinion and then he moves on. Like a great columnist, for instance, if they say, I think Coach X should be fired, they don't continually work that in every single column that they write. They've stated their opinion. That's where they are. They move on. So I think Nick Saban is doing that. He's moving on. He might lose that debate, but ultimately he's going to make the best of it, just like he did with up-tempo offenses.
It's a great lesson in life, honestly, what Nick Saban does, because I will address things that I think are unfair in life in my life. I will, but then I could either cry about it or I could still adjust and deal with it. We're all taught to deal with it. You can address if something's unfair, but you're still taught you have to deal with it if it is unfair. That's just how things go.
It's like with my kids. If I tell them, I've got a problem with X, well, that's a bad example because I would continue to come down on them. But if they told me they had a problem with me, then I would say, well, I'll see if I can work on that, and I'm probably not going to. So that's Nick Saban just moves on. And Nick Saban's going to end up paying players more and more. Just wait and see that's going to happen. All right. So fourth down, if you're Josh Heupel, what's your agenda? Every coach down there has an agenda. Brian Kelly's was to say, I'm not afraid of playing Alabama, which sounds great. Makes him look like a GEAUX Tiger. And Nick Saban now maybe is reverting a little bit on his thoughts on the schedule. If you're Josh Heupel, what is your agenda? What are you trying to push? Because you've got a lot more clout this year than you did last year at SEC spring meetings. Any agenda you would push as part of fourth down? I'm curious where you go on this. This didn't come up in our 3:15 production meeting, but I wanted to see where you might go with that.
I'm going to tell you a secret.
That's crazy.
All right, what do you got?
I think Tennessee is in such a rarely good position with NIL and who their permanent opponent would be, whether or not it's 1-7 or 3-6, that he shouldn't have an agenda. He should just sit back.
Just keep his mouth shut.
Just keep his mouth shut. I don't think Tennessee, I think there's no way this doesn't benefit Tennessee. If it's 1-7, their permanent opponent is Vanderbilt. If it's 3-6, their permanent opponents are Vanderbilt, South Carolina, and Alabama. Outside of Alabama, that's a heck of a deal. And Tennessee's rolling in NIL money right now, so they are winning on that. Stay quiet, Josh. Don't say a word.
Okay, I kind of agree with you, but I kind of don't. And here's why. Because I would take it a step further. I'd push all my chips into the table, and I would say, here's the deal. I think the kids deserve more money. I think it needs to become streamlined to make it easier. I think that prospects, if they need to get paid because of family circumstance, should get paid. I would paint myself as the anti-Dabo Sweeney. I'm so pro NIL that I'm just throwing out hundies, $100 bills left and right. That's what I would do if I were Josh Heupel. Now, all that sounds
be like
funny.
Deion Sanders glamorous.
Yes, that's kind of similar. I would shoot for that, and if I fell just short of it, I'm in pretty good shape. The irony is that Tennessee's pushing the NIL boundaries more than anybody. Other coaches are going to scratch their head and look at you like, what is he talking about? That Tennessee's already pushing the boundaries of what you can do there. But yeah, I would come out if I was Josh Heupel, and I would say, it's time for me to be a leader. I want to find ways to get these guys more money and make it streamlined. And that's our goal at Tennessee. And that's why you should play for Tennessee. And Tennessee rhymes with money. And you should like money. And you should like Tennessee. And then I would leave with this. Hey now. And I'm out the door. Drop the mic, Chris Rock style. That's what I would say. Completely like Nick Saban. It is absolutely completely contrived and orchestrated, but that's what I would do. Now, Rocky Top Tom says we're pushing this NIL thing really hard, and it is going to come back and bite us the patoot eventually.
Oh, Rocky Top Tom, will you stop being so anti-NIL? Like,
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't hate that. It could. We'll see. But right
the
now,
21st century.
Man, right now it looks like that's the platform to be on. I need to get the kids more money. I think these. I would take it this far. I would like to call upon all of my fellow SEC coaches and their respective boosters to find ways to get these young men more money.
And what you know what I do if I'm Heupel? I'd start calling out the coaches. I'd be like, for all you coaches complaining about it, these kids are the reason you get these multi-million-dollar salaries. So maybe stop me. Like, this is the thing. Like, I love when coaches complain about it when, like, theoretically, they're state employees. So they're supposed to be there to educate kids in the public school system, technically. And they make $10 million to do that. And they don't educate them to do a darn thing except block and tackle. Okay? So, I mean, we sit there and say that with coaches. Can I
take it a step further? I would also say, look at what LSU is doing. They're getting some gymnasts like $1.5 million a year. I hope the rest of their football players are being taken care of.
Oh, wow. Throw them under the bus.
Yeah. Like a little side shade. She is making like 1 point. Have you heard of that gymnast?
I think I have.
Lady? Yeah.
But we talked about.
She's a lot more attractive than any football players we've ever spoken of.
We've talked about this, though. Who was it that brought up that LSU's like going all in on like all their programs? Was it Josh Ward that told us that? Or
it was John Adams, because he was in Louisiana.
I want to address, speaking of all this, before we get out of this topic, that Eli Drinkwitz.
Let me add this one part. I do want to get to Drinkwitz. Let me add this one part. As right as Tennessee is doing NIL, okay, LSU is doing it a step better. Okay, from everybody that I've talked to. And part of that,
LSU homer.
Well, and part of that is because I think they're less concerned, the collectives, about making their own money and they're more concerned about growing the athlete's exposure. I think when you have one collective that's very strong, you have to be a little bit concerned that they're in it just for their best interest, and they don't want the player to get too big because then he starts cutting his own deals and he doesn't need an agent/collective. LSU has billboards all over the place with players on it. I don't see that in Knoxville. Caleb, yours Drinkwitz is Drunkwitz?
Well, I'm going to defend Eli Drinkwitz because he was taken completely out of context yesterday by a lot of people. And believe me, guys, I wish what he said out of context, what we thought he said was true, because it gave us fodder for a show. And the more stuff we get like that, the better. But the line that was taken out was, he said at one point with NIL, people thought people are making more money on NIL than my brother-in-law, who's a pediatrician and save lives. Yes, that nugget sounds stupid because Eli Drinkwitz makes more money than his brother, who's a pediatrician and saves lives. So, I mean, unless you think coaching saves lives, just stop. And I mean, I will say college football coaches really do think they're like saving lives. They think they're curing cancer with what they do a lot of times, and they're not. But
well, listen, bottom line, a doctor deserves more. I mean, goodness gracious, a vet deserves more than an NFL player, I would argue,
right,
but that's where we are.
The thing that drives me crazy, though, is like every other part of the country, when there's unfair wage standards and differences, we all say that's capitalism. That's the market. But when an athlete takes advantage of capitalism in the market to make their money, we're like, oh, that's so immoral. Why is that immoral? Why is that any more immoral than anything else where people make money that they don't deserve? And that's where I'm at. But what I was going to say was, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, I interrupted you.
Drinkwitz's full comments, guys. He was asked a question about gambling, and he said, we're giving guys 18 to 22-year-olds life-changing money. People are making more money on NIL than my brother-in-law, who is a pediatrician who saves lives. And we kind of do it cavalier, and we think there's not going to be side effects or issues. There's information out there, bad actors out there, always trying to make a dollar, running around campuses trying to gather information. It's going to become a key locker room issue. He was talking about, I think, the dangers of NIL with gambling for players. Now, yeah, the pediatrician saves lives. He should have just cut that out. That made no sense. I mean,
that's his problem, though, is he never stops talking or talks when he shouldn't. He did the same thing on the Jim Rome show for SEC Media Days. I mean, that's Eli's problem. That's like, saying this guy, the Oscar Pistorius would be faster if he had two legs. I mean, maybe he would, but it's not going to change who he is, and Eli's not going to change who he is.
Yeah, exactly. And so I defend Eli with the context of what he was trying to say, but it was just a weird thing to say. That doesn't mean I believe in Eli long term. I'm with you. I'm not so sure he's the smartest coach in the world. And I have actually read I've read a lot of
actual accounts of his idiocy. Is that what you've read?
For the 5 Missouri fans that do exist in online, I have a lot of people were wanting the Josh Heupel hire before Tennessee hired him. They wanted Josh Heupel over Eli Drinkwitz. I could just say that.
Yeah, I've had. Yeah, I mean, I could think of the guy I bumped into at the gym would have been a better hire than Eli Drinkwitz. I mean,
all right. The three Stooges, Eli Drinkwitz,
right
Shane Beamer, Billy Napier.
Yeah, that's right up with the Butch Jones thing. All right, so coming up, the team you're not talking about, guys. The team we haven't talked about. We deserve some of the blame, but you need to hear about them next. And they're doing great things. Could a championship be in their grasp? Possibly. 2 minutes, Caleb Calhoun, Dave Hooker off those.
To own the more that owns every job, then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
There's your pair.
Our family has been creating one-of-a-kind pieces of jewelry in West Knoxville since 1986. Each piece is a combination of unique processes that bring your idea to life. Every day in our shop, a truly special item with a story all its own is being manufactured in our facility, bringing the history and family sentiment into a whole new generation of life. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler, a title that we value and respect. Because to me, being a jeweler and owning a jewelry store are not the same thing. I'm Rick Terry. I'm a jeweler, and we want to be your jeweler. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street right next to the Tennessee Theater.
With all that sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center. Ah.
What's up, everybody? This is Jacob Warren asking you to like, subscribe, and share. Dave needs this.
He does.
Objective coverage. Hey, that's new.
If we get caught, we're going to jail.
The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of Off the Hook Sports. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app.
I'm going to need to see some identification.
Back to Dave Hooker.
The message board. Someone's about to talk softballs. Is that a thing now? Softballs? Maybe we'll talk some softballs, but I haven't heard that. I've heard diamond balls. Softball,
baseball, softballs. I've never heard softballs for softball, but
well, I kind of like it. Maybe it's something that we could start. I'm sure that some licensing agreement would prevent us from coming up with T-shirts. But the by the way, Travis says, ever buy a pediatrician shirt? No, you don't. You don't, but some people bought a Hooker shirt because of the quarterback, and I don't know that. I love my doctor, but I don't know that anybody's bought a Dr. Smith shirt.
I mean, it's funny you said a Hooker shirt. In Nevada, the market dictates the better hookers do get paid, man. The better sex, like that's capitalism.
I guess. Yeah, is that Pahrump or something that's in Nevada that people go to for the real other hookers? Is that what you're referring to?
I don't know what it's called. The thing that shocks me with Nevada is if you are great at sex work, why would you work for somebody? Can't you really just run your own business and make your own clients?
Sounds like a Theo Vaughn topic. I'm Dave Hooker. He's Caleb Calhoun. We have the discussion that I wanted to get into now, and that is, before we get to the softballs, Josh Heupel versus Lincoln Riley. Who runs their offense better? Which is very similar. Let's give a little bit of context. Josh Heupel's offense is not the same offense that Mike Leach ran, for instance, just because it has some tempo and they throw the ball a lot. The Josh Heupel's offense, to define it, is based off wide splits. It is based off tempo. It's based off putting the safety most oftentimes in a very difficult position and making reads off of him. So Heupel's offense and Riley's offense are very similar in that regard, Caleb. They're not even necessarily, their offense is not exactly the TCU offense. They all do a little something different. But those three offenses in particular, before we get to Heupel versus Riley, how would you compare those three offenses?
Well, Garrett TCU's offense is a lot closer to what Mike Leach did. It's the air raid that actually, don't speak ill of the dead, but it adjusts better to personnel and defensive schemes, whereas Mike Leach's air raid was, I'm sticking to this system, the way we run it, and I'm not going to change it at all.
Yes, and I don't think that's even speaking ill of him. It worked out at schools that didn't win a lot of football games before he showed up. So yes. It was simple. They were able to do it Would it have translated had he got the job at Tennessee? I don't know. I think Tennessee's in a better position with Josh Heupel, frankly. So what do you think of Heupel versus Riley? I'm curious.
So I made up a term. I made up a term for their offenses last year, and I called it the veer and shoot, which is it's a combination of Mike Leach's air raid. It actually does involve that, but it brings in the principles of Art Briles' offense and what he developed at the high school level in Texas, which is where you get the wide splits and things like that. They pretty much run the same offenses on different sides of the country. If you really watch Lincoln Riley and Josh Heupel. And for those who want to know the history with this, we talked about this earlier, Josh Heupel was forced to include RPOs and zone read options in his offense in 2014 by Bob Stoops, because Bob Stoops got torched by Johnny Manziel in the 2012 Cotton Bowl, 2013 Cotton Bowl, and he wanted to add the element of the RPO that Cliff Kingsbury used in the air raid and force that on Josh Heupel with Trevor Knight. And just so people know, for those who don't know the ins and outs, that's very anathema to the offense Josh Heupel runs and what Trevor Knight can do. There's not as many RPOs.
What word did you just use there?
Anathema, contradictory. Sorry.
Tough one.
Blasphemous. Yeah. And it's very, I don't know if people noticed this last year. There weren't that many RPOs. I don't think there were any, were there, by Hooker last year in Josh Heupel's offense?
I thought there were some on the goal line. Yeah, I thought there were. Yeah, I definitely thought there was some on the goal line.
But when you're spreading the field at midfield, you're not running that many. And he was trying to force that because he wanted Trevor Knight to be Johnny Manziel. It didn't work. It clashed. Oklahoma still had a good offense, but Heupel was scapegoated. He was fired. And then Stoops brings in Lincoln Riley to run the exact same offense that Josh Heupel wanted to run. And so in Oklahoma, that propels Lincoln Riley to head coach, gets him the USC job. Thankfully, Josh Heupel rebuilt himself after being railroaded. But that's where this connection comes into play. Lincoln Riley was allowed to run the offense at Oklahoma. He became a household name running the offense at Oklahoma that Josh Heupel had wanted to run for 4 years and wasn't allowed to run by Bob Stoops. And now they're running the same offense on different sides of the country.
Here's ultimately the debate, right? It's Lincoln Riley has done it longer as a head coach. Josh Heupel, and by the way, Lincoln Riley has a Heisman Trophy winner just this past year. So let's not just dismiss him like Heupel is immediately better just because you might live in East Tennessee. I think the debate is Lincoln Riley has done it longer and had more success, as opposed to Josh Heupel has done it with lesser parts, particularly at Tennessee and Central Florida, and has had success. So it depends which side of the coin you want to take in that regard. So let's get your thoughts on the message board. Me, if I'm an AD, I'm going to go with Lincoln Riley, the more surefire thing right now. We could be having a totally different conversation in a year, because this would be 2 straight years if Tennessee's able to get great play out of, or even very good play out of its quarterback position. Then I stand corrected. I stand corrected on Hendon Hooker, who I thought had accuracy issues. If Josh Heupel does it again with Joe Milton, I'll stand corrected again, and then I might have a different take. But right now, if I'm an AD, I'm going to take Lincoln Riley just because of track record.
I am going to take, and I'll play your game on track record, Dave. And with track record, I'm still taking Josh Heupel, and I'll tell you why.
Okay, all right, here we go.
Josh Heupel has been an offensive since being fired by Oklahoma and being allowed to run his offense. He's been an offensive coordinator or a head coach, really calling the plays basically, for 8 years now, and 4 of those have been in the SEC. None of them have been in the SEC for Lincoln Riley. 2 of those for Josh Heupel, just so you guys understand, were at Missouri, when Missouri was, by all accounts, the worst, most on-fire program in the SEC. I don't know if you guys know this, but Josh Heupel took over Missouri after the whole Mizzou protest scandal thing in 2015. That was not a desirable job. And Barry Odom, to his credit, made the right move to bring in Josh Heupel as offensive coordinator. And Josh Heupel had Drew Lock throwing for 500 yards a game, or had Drew Lock's offense putting up 500 yards a game against SEC defenses for 2 years at the worst school in the SEC at the time. He then comes back to the SEC and takes over, by all accounts, what was the most on-fire program in the SEC as head coach, which was Tennessee. And in 2 years, he's got them in the top. He has a Heisman candidate at quarterback. I think that track record favors Josh Heupel, honestly, more than I don't think Lincoln Riley took over Oklahoma for Bob Stoops when the program was already rolling. He went to USC, which already had talent, and he brought his quarterback with him. Lincoln Riley twice walked into good situations. Josh Heupel took over terrible situations.
Okay. I'm going to give you something else that's going to strengthen your argument against me, because if I'm an AD, I'm taking Lincoln Riley. I can get ripped on the message board if you want me to. I may have a totally different take in 8 months, 9 months. But Lincoln Riley is doing it and has done it against defenses that weren't very good. I mean, when he was at the Big 12, I mean, there was a ton of points scored. They couldn't play with the SEC more times than not. And the Pac-12, the defenses are even worse, Caleb. So he has had that ability. So that strengthens your argument. I don't think there's any question about that. Again, though, to strengthen my argument, has Tennessee truly played for a championship? I can't say that they have, because of the way they fell so flat against South Carolina. They were on the verge of it, but they haven't. Lincoln Riley has. I also would think that Lincoln Riley, given his experience, might have an answer when things went so wrong in Columbia. Now, maybe with the Jeremy Banks issue earlier and Hooker getting hurt, it just was never going to happen, and that's possible. But I would like to think a more tenured coach would have an answer at some point mid-game, right? But there was no answer for Tennessee and Josh Heupel.
I mean, before we get there, and this isn't necessarily because of his offense in his defense if you watch those games, but can Lincoln Riley win a playoff game? Can he win one college football playoff game? He's 0-3 against the SEC when he was at Oklahoma and played in the college football playoff. And the last one was an embarrassment. They lost, I think, 63-28 to LSU in 2019. And so, yes, the South Carolina game, they laid an egg, but look at what what's been happening to him. Now, he did beat an SEC team in a bowl game. I think he beat Florida in 2020. He beat Dan Mullen in Florida in 2020. So
I'm really to the point where I'd like to take all bowl records and just throw them away, because I covered so many of those. I don't know who was motivated half the time. I knew after the game, after watching the game, but if you start citing Lincoln Riley here and Lincoln Riley there in bowl games, man, I would have to go back and look. Were both teams adequately motivated to win whatever they needed to win at that particular time? I don't know. I don't remember that. I don't remember the Florida motivation going in.
What we're really seeing is bowl games are actually, ironically, what they used to be when the polls were counted before at the end of the regular season and before the bowl games. It's, for those who don't know, bowl games were glorified exhibitions through the 1960s. I mean, I can go through the list of teams that have national championships and lost their bowl games, including the 51 Vols. But I'm kind of with you.
I think they were kind of glorified exhibitions up until like 2000 when they had, or 98 when they had the BCS system.
Well, the elite from the 70s through the 90s, the elite bowls were teams cared to win those games. Tennessee cared about that 85 Sugar Bowl. They didn't have a national championship to play for, but they cared about playing in that 85 Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, but it was so hit or miss still. I mean, no, they cared about the 85 one, but does anybody remember the 84 or 86 bowl game they played in?
Didn't they play in the Peach Bowl in 86?
I mean, you would, but most people wouldn't. Yes. And I look at some of the other bowl games that, I don't think Tennessee wasn't motivated to play in the 99 Fiesta Bowl. It would have been the 2000 Fiesta Bowl after the 99 season.
I question if they were motivated in the 97 Orange Bowl when they lost to Nebraska, because Michigan had won the day before. So they found out even if they had won that game, they wouldn't have been national champions.
They were absolutely not motivated to play in that game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was all determined.
It was, the question was, will Nebraska split with Michigan, or will Michigan be national champs outright? Tennessee had no shot by the time Peyton Manning's last game kicked off. And I mean, that's a fair debate. You're right. Let's throw out bowl games. But in games that matter, Lincoln Riley's never beaten an SEC team. And that except for when he was offensive coordinator, he did beat Tennessee in 2015, but that's because Butch Jones choked away that game. And Lincoln Riley's offense only scored 20 points. So,
yes, Smoky Mountain Red, Caleb is an NCAA football historian. There's no question about that. Portions of the program brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Look at me. I don't have glasses. I don't have contacts. I got LASIK. It's fantastic. They do cataract surgery as well. And the great part is they're local. Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, also with their individual vision centers, can take care of your annual checkups and such. I'm looking at myself when I'm pointing out that I'm not wearing glasses or contacts, and I'm realizing that, well, I went camping over the weekend, so I got a lot of sun, and Caleb has the brightest light ever. So I suddenly look like an incredibly tan individual.
I'm also just a very, very, very pale person. So,
I feel like Ricardo Montalban doing the Lincoln commercials back in the day.
For those who don't know, I'm an NCAA historian because I actually died in like 1940, and I'm coming back. I'm back as a ghost, and so
he's an old soul. He plays Dean Martin and Joey Bishop constantly on his iPad. What was it before the iPad? The little thing that we had that was about as heavy as a brick.
iPod?
Was it iPod? Yes, that's what it was. So Caleb listens to only the Rat Pack in his iPod. All right. So here we go. Softballs. We named them right here.
Baseball, volleyball, softballs, but yeah.
Yes. So as far as both programs, what do you make of Tennessee's Diamond Vols kind of fly under the radar a little bit, which compared to last year is probably a good thing. I think they crossed the line as far as good taste, and they ended up flaming out the Supers. And then you have the softball team that's just quietly been pounding on the door. I feel like with this softball team, because they missed their opportunity with Monica Abbott, that there's this sense of, I'll believe it when I see it. Is that fair by Tennessee's fan base? Is that fair for me to say that?
Yeah, it is, because when that Monica Abbott situation happened, for people who need context, at the time, the Pac-12 or Pac-10, I guess back then, dominated softball, like just dominated it. And here comes Tennessee from the SEC, all getting so close to winning it, and then Arizona pulls it out, and you start to think, okay, it's just not meant to be for a team like Tennessee to win the national title in softball. This is a rare chance for them. They haven't had as good of a season since then until now. And this season, this team might even actually be better. You have a chance to right the wrong of 2007. This is Dirk going back to the NBA Finals in 2011 after losing to the Heat in 2006 and choking away that 2-0 series lead. This is that situation. And it is, you're right, it's under the radar because of that loss, and also because Oklahoma has really kind of put together a mini dynasty in softball. But guys, Tennessee has a really good chance of winning this thing. And I don't think people notice that. And if they do,
in softball,
in softball. And baseball is such a crapshoot of a sport. I'm with you. I think it's good for them that they're on the road playing under the radar. They don't get to host a regional in the NCAAs.
Is this baseball team more likable, even though they're less successful? Tennessee's baseball team? Or are they less likable?
I think
to Tennessee fans, not to Caleb or to Dave necessarily.
I wouldn't say less likable. I think the thing with it is last year, you're only unlikable if you're doing what they were doing last year and you don't produce. For instance, I'm a Grizzly fan. The Grizzlies talk a lot of trash, and then they go and lose in the first round of the Lakers. That's an unlikable team, okay? Or if you're the Bengals in the NFL, and you talk all that trash about Patrick Mahomes, and then you lose to him in the playoffs. That's an unlikable team. I think this baseball team, I think they were smart to be quieter this year because they were just not as good. or not able to run through the SEC. So I think their attitude both years kind of matched up with their play. And so I don't know if they're I don't think they're more or less likable in that way.
I think to the Tennessee fan base, and correct me if I'm wrong, would love to see your comments below. We replied to all comments, but I think you'd rather have last year. If they ended at the same point in the Super Regionals, I think you would rather have last year's Diamond Balls as opposed to this year. They were exciting. They crossed the line at times. There's no question about that. But I think you'd rather have that. Now, if you're like, let's say an Alabama football program, somebody takes over for Nick Saban, you don't want that because there is this tradition. Well, there's not a great tradition at Tennessee baseball. There's not. I mean, there's every 15-year tradition, something crops up. So, and I think this is a football town, like every single SEC town except for Lexington, Kentucky. So I think at the end of the day, when you've got some spice, people like that. I think people like Jerry Green's teams because they were dunking and throwing it down and throwing oops. They didn't necessarily like what Jerry Green had to say about the fan base, and eventually that hurt him, probably cost him his job. But I think Tennessee fans like the spice, and I don't blame them. You are the guy who is just compared to the LSUs of the world, compared to who are some other South Carolinas of the world, some great baseball programs. You're the guy that doesn't matter. So the guy that doesn't matter, I think people appreciate it when you make some noise and say, I matter.
Oh, I agree.
Go ahead. It may be your Grizzlies path of thinking. It may end up that way, but I still think people would like that as the prelude to the collapse.
Well, the problem with my Grizzlies pathway of thinking is they acted all that way. Ja Morant says, I'm fine in the West. Then they lose in the first round. And then 2 weeks later, Josh partying with another gun and seems to not even care that he lost. So I'm going to talk all this trash. I want to embarrass myself and then not care that I embarrassed myself for trying to get better. I don't think Tennessee was that way. But you're right. Look at LSU women's basketball. The whole world hated Angel Reese after that title and the way she was talking. LSU's embraced it. The whole state has embraced it. And you're right. That's how you get a gymnast making $1.5 million or whatever in NIL. And so I'm with you on that. I think it's a good thing. Dave, here's an underrated thing. How big of a deal is this? And I wanted to ask you. Tennessee is one of only 4 schools to make a bowl game in football in the NCAA tournament in basketball, women's basketball, baseball, and softball. Is that a big deal?
I mean, if I'm Danny White, I'm bringing that up in my next contract negotiation. For sure. So they're only one of 4 schools to do that.
And they're only one of 2 when you throw volleyball in the mix.
Okay, well, I have no idea who the other one is volleyball. But what were the stipulations on football again?
Bowl game. I said bowl game in football. And then NCAA tournament in the other sports.
Okay, they've come up a lot. I'm going to play the guessing game and see if I can do this. I'm going to go South Carolina as one of the other ones.
Oh, you want to guess the other schools?
Yes, quickly. I'm not going to take forever. Is South Carolina the other one?
No, it is not.
That's crazy.
All right. LSU the other one.
Nope.
That's crazy.
I'm not going to get a single one.
I'm going to give you a really big clue. You really got to shoot your shot with this one.
Ja Morant?
No, college.
No, I'd shoot your shot.
But you're kind of on the right path. I just want to say you're on the right path with that.
I don't know who it is. Tell me the other 3.
Alabama. Shoot your shot, man.
Yeah. I almost guessed Alabama. I should have.
Alabama, Duke, funny enough.
For some reason, I was going to guess Duke. I'm not even joking. I didn't, so I lay no credit to it.
And the 4th and final one is the only other school to make it in all those sports plus volleyball is the other UT, Texas.
Okay. And who's the volleyball one?
Well, that's what Tennessee and Texas are the only 2 to make it in all 5 of those sports plus volleyball.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. It's good stuff. I don't know where you came up with that stat, but that's pretty good.
Football Scoop just reported it.
Who reported that?
Football Scoop just reported it. But I'm curious with you. Is it a big deal if Is it a big deal for Tennessee athletics to be that present in so many postseasons?
No.
You don't think it helps the football program at all?
I'm sorry. I mean, at the end of the day, I see the analytics. It's 90% football. It's 10%, 8%, let's say, men's basketball, and 2% women's basketball. And then everybody else is fighting for like a scrounge of a percentage.
Yeah, I don't think Alabama cares if their basketball team's put on probation for the rest of eternity if they get another national championship.
You could walk around a baseball game and say, I'll trade you 10 years of season tickets to see the Diamond Vols play, or you can have 1 year of football tickets. And what's going to win out?
Well, for me, it's going to be the 10 year. I'm taking the 10 years of season tickets in baseball because I like watching football games on TV.
That's fair, but I think you know the answer.
Yes.
He is Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern time. It's a short week, but we're not short on content. We'll have news from SEC spring meetings coming up, and there is a lot going on. Josh Heupel, I'm sure, will make some news in some shape, form, or fashion. For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. This has been a presentation of Off the Hook.